His life story inspires empathy, art programs, and even mental health discussions. He may have died in obscurity, but Vincent van Gogh's work lives on eternally. Welcome to Icons of History, where we dive deep into the past to uncover the stories of the individuals who shaped our world. From great leaders to visionaries who changed the course of humanity, here we bring you the tales of the icons who left an indelible mark on the pages of history. Vincent van Gogh, his name evokes images of swirling skies, brilliant fields of yellow, fiery strands of paint already in motion. Yet the man behind these iconic works remains an enigma, defined not only by his artistic innovation, but also by the depths of his solitude, his relentless inner turmoil, and the tragic circumstances of his life. Today, Vincent van Gogh is celebrated as one of the greatest painters to ever have lived. Yet during his lifetime, he sold only a single painting, dying in anonymity and despair. His story is one of paradox, a tale of rejection that gave way to universal reverence, of struggle that produced joy on canvas, of a man who could see beauty in a world that alienated him entirely. Let's begin by exploring where his journey started. The small Dutch town of Zundert, nestled in the lowlands of the Netherlands. Vincent Willem van Gogh was born there on March 30th, 1853, into a deeply religious family. His father, Theodorus van Gogh, was a Protestant minister, and his mother, Anna Cornelia Carbentus, instilled in her children a love for nature and tradition. Vincent was born exactly 1 year after the death of his parents' first son, who also bore the name Vincent, and this eerie coincidence may have planted a subconscious weight within him, an inexplicable sense of replacement. His childhood was not particularly remarkable, though early signs of his sensitivity and mood swings were evident. Vincent was known for his quiet nature, often withdrawing from others, even while developing a curious affinity for landscapes and rural life. As a child, he would wander through meadows and gardens, observing every detail, the texture of bark, the movement of sunlight, the hue of flowers, imbuing his mind with the raw sensory experiences that would later inform his work. By the time he reached his teenage years, Vincent had become an avid reader, delving into religious texts, poetry, and philosophy. It was this religious fervor that first shaped his early ambitions, as Van Gogh briefly embraced the idea of following in his father's footsteps and becoming a minister. In 1879, he undertook missionary work in the coal mining region of Bornage in Belgium, a location that would deeply affect him. Van Gogh lived among laborers in poverty-stricken conditions, sleeping on straw and giving away his possessions to the poor. His remarkable empathy for their struggles led some to view him as an eccentric, while others admired his devotion. Yet his unorthodox behavior and his inability to articulate his passion within the rigid confines of dogma led to his dismissal by religious authorities. That rejection devastated him and planted the seeds for Van Gogh's eventual reorientation toward art. In the period that followed, Van Gogh fluctuated between an assortment of ambitions and crushed hopes. He briefly pursued careers as an art dealer and as a school teacher before turning entirely to drawing and painting in 1880 at the age of 27, a late start for an artist who would come to define modernism. Initially, Van Gogh worked obsessively on self-directed studies, borrowing techniques from Dutch masters and attempting to depict everyday scenes in working-class life with unpolished, earthy tones. One of his most famous early works, The Potato Eaters, exemplifies this phase. Stark, deeply shadowed and painted in dark browns and greens, the work captures peasant life with an uncompromising directness. It lacks the vivid palette and expressive brushstrokes that defined his later work, but it reveals something essential about Van Gogh, his ability to find dignity and human connection in lives marked by hardship. Vincent became increasingly nomadic, moving from place to place in pursuit of artistic evolution. His time in The Hague and Nieuwenan saw him refine traditional techniques, but it wasn't until his arrival in Paris in 1886 that he was thrust into the vibrant avant-garde art scene. There he encountered the Impressionists, artists like Claude Monet, Paul Gauguin, and Émile Bernard, who were experimenting with light, color, and movement in ways that shattered conventions. They inspired him to abandon his somber palette, turning his attention to exploding colors and free-form compositions. Yet Van Gogh did not merely imitate their style, he transformed it. His brushstrokes became charged with emotion and rhythm, weaving fiery patterns into skies, trembling energy into sunflowers. His life in Paris was also fraught with complexities. He struggled to connect with others socially, often overwhelming potential friendships with his fierce moods and erratic behavior. Though he shared an apartment with his brother Theo, the two brothers had their share of discord. Theo, however, proved to be Vincent's greatest champion. Working as an art dealer, Theo financially supported Vincent while encouraging him to pursue his creative path, a lifeline that Vincent grew to both depend on and resent. Their correspondence through more than 600 letters remains one of the richest insights into Van Gogh's psyche. In 1888, Van Gogh left Paris and settled in the southern French town of Arles, hoping to establish an artist colony while seeking solace outside the chaos of the city. It was in Arles that Van Gogh created some of his most iconic works: the Yellow House, the Bedroom, and his radiant series depicting blossoming trees. The sun-drenched landscapes of Provence rejuvenated him artistically. The yellows, blues, and greens of the region painted themselves onto his canvases. He worked feverishly, producing nearly 200 paintings in just 15 months. Yet Arles was also where Vincent's mental health began to unravel. Van Gogh's infamous breakdown occurred in December 1888. After a heated argument with Gauguin, who had briefly joined him in Arles, Vincent experienced psychosis. He mutilated his own ear. That act of self-harm led to his hospitalization, where doctors diagnosed him with a form of epilepsy or schizophrenia. Despite these challenges, Van Gogh's time in the asylum at Saint-Rémy-de-Provence only furthered his artistry. He painted some of his most remarkable works during periods of lucidity, including Starry Night, Irises, and Wheatfield with Cypresses, which shimmer with emotional turbulence. To Vincent, painting wasn't merely an act of creation, it was an act of survival. The final chapter of Van Gogh's life unfolded in Auvers-sur-Oise, just north of Paris, where he moved in May 1890 to be under the care of Dr. Paul Gachet. Though he continued to produce works at an astonishing pace, painting over 70 canvases in 2 months, Vincent carried the profound weight of despair. On July 27, 1890, he shot himself in a wheat field and died 2 days later with Theo by his side. He was only 37 years old. His death marked the end of a life marked by rejection, illness, and the unfulfilled hope of being understood. So what changed? How did the world come to revere Vincent van Gogh, a man who had died believing himself a failure? Much of the credit goes to Theo, who poured his energy into preserving Vincent's work and memory after his death. It was Theo's widow, Johanna van Gogh Bonger, who truly championed Vincent's legacy. Johanna organized exhibitions and introduced his letters to the public, which revealed the genius and passion behind his art. As the 20th century progressed, Van Gogh's radical use of color, form, and emotion resonated with audiences seeking beauty and authenticity beyond realism. Vincent van Gogh's legacy continues to inspire, reminding us of the power of art to transcend time and touch the deepest parts of the human soul. His impact on art is immeasurable. Post-Impressionism, Expressionism, Fauvism, all movements owe something to Vincent van Gogh's innovation. His ability to infuse canvases with raw emotion paved the way for modern art forms that prioritize subjectivity and imagination over replication. Beyond that, Van Gogh has become a symbol of the misunderstood artist, the creative soul burdened by mental anguish, yet capable of transformative brilliance. And then there's the legacy that transcends art: Vincent van Gogh's humanity. Through fields of sunflowers, swirling stars, and windswept wheat fields, Van Gogh reminds us of how fragile and beautiful existence is. In viewing his work, we are asked to see the world anew, to find grandeur in simplicity, and perhaps most importantly, to seek connection, even amidst solitude. Today, Vincent van Gogh's paintings hang in the most prestigious galleries across the globe, captivating millions. His life story inspires empathy, art programs, and even mental health discussions. He may have died in obscurity, but Vincent van Gogh's work lives on eternally, not as relics of the past, but as vivid celebrations of life, color, and the complexity of human emotion. In the end, Vincent's enduring legacy is not simply that he learned to paint the stars, but that he taught the rest of us how to see them. Thank you for joining us on this journey through time with icons of history. If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell to stay updated with our latest videos. See you next time, as we explore more icons who made history.